This weekend is an interesting weekend. And many of you know me pretty well by now. That, as a minister, when there's a holiday to acknowledge or observe, I do that. And I also find a way to do that is totally authentic for me. And I'm here because this teaching works for that as well. So if you're here, chances are it's a good fit for you too. So we got that out of the way. So we have this thing called Memorial Day, which is tomorrow. And it is a day to honor and pay homage to those who have lost their lives in battle in the United States Armed Forces. Apparently, because I checked Wikipedia and I believe it, it started after the Civil War with a tradition of decorating grave sites with flowers, bringing blankets and pots of food to share. And apparently that's where the origin of the term potluck came from. Now, of course, throughout time there have been many traditions of gathering, feasting, paying homage, giving thanks, celebrating, connecting with those who've passed on. Some of them are done at the time of the harvest moon. Some of them are done to commemorate a birth, a passing, a battle. But the tradition of honoring those people has always been with us because it's part of who we are. So, of course, in this room, for us, in this line of thought, on this day before all that, there's an opportunity for some spiritual growth. And that's because there are principles involved in everything that we do, in all of life's cycles and all of life's experiences, that offer us different layers of understanding and awakening and evolution. Different layers of awakening depending on where we're looking and how and with what eyes. So there's a powerful kind of spiritual practice that we get to employ with this particular holiday or this particular kind of activity that offers great transformation. Initially, and this is where you'll hear a lot of people talking about spiritual practice, you'll hear something that sounds trite, that sounds like a platitude, that sounds like an easy out. But it's really not if we look deeper. With every one of these spiritual principles that I'm thinking about today, if you look quickly and without depth and casually, you won't see it. But if you look in a lingering way, if you look with depth, if you look in more than a casual way, there's always something to be seen and to be found in doing that. So, for example, we take this idea of forgiveness. We take this idea that we go back and we remember that someone that we love perhaps died in service to our country or because of some other circumstance in their experience. And do you know, it doesn't matter whether it's ancient or it happened yesterday. If we choose this concept of remembrance, then we have an opportunity, and one of them is forgiveness. A common misunderstanding about forgiveness is that it means that we condone whatever it was that took place. And of course, any of us who have gone anywhere deep with that know that it's not so. Many have turned away because we think that it is. That in order to forgive whatever this is, I have to agree with it. We have this thing in our classes that we've been exploring right now, that we separate the belief from the believer. So in this case, we would separate the incident from the individual. And the first opportunity for revelation is to realize that they're two different things. We can forgive something without condoning it. we can still say, this did happen, and I'm going to look for the gift. I'm going to look for some greater value in this than just my own loss, my own grief, my own sorrow, or resentment, and desire for vengeance and retaliation. And you see why we get to resolve that. We have the opportunity to make a choice to resolve it. You will see in every group you visit, every group of people that's studying a book or a teaching of some sort, or has started a club around an idea, you will have those who see it at its very simplest level. And they see it, and they know it, and they experience it, they exude it in a different way than those who get it at a deeper level, at a more expansive one. We don't condemn anybody for what they don't know yet, because we're all right where we're supposed to be on our path of awakening. But we can understand that as we see with new eyes and hear with new ears and look more deeply, we will find something other than the simple act of, okay, I forgive you. Because if you just did that and you tried to move on, you'd still be carrying it all along. So there's a higher idea, there's a more expansive experience of forgiveness than just, okay, I forgive you, and move along. That's really not the completion of the work. Another concept that comes up a great deal in this sort of exploration, when we look at remembrance, when we look at forgiveness, and when we look at gratitude, is this idea that because something happened, it must have been God's will. This idea of purpose or destiny. I had a very interesting experience. I made the choice to read The Shack because Oprah said so. But, I was a few years late picking up. I found it somewhere. It was in one of those borrow it and read it on your own things. And so I read that. And I love how it just messed with everybody's preconceived notions about so many things, including mine. But one of the things that was in there that I feel as well is that just because something happened, and just because we found it in ourselves to make the choice, to discover the meaning, to find a gift, to make it mean more or worth more than just having happened, it doesn't mean necessarily that it was God's will. It's pretty daring. It's pretty daring. But this idea that I'm talking about is that everything is made out of creation. Everything is made out of perfection. Everything is made out of perfect, pure spiritual substance. Everything is already wholly intelligent, wholly loving, wholly, holy, holy, whole. Everyone is already perfect. And what we do when we heal is we reveal that perfection. We uncover it. Whether this is physical or emotional or spiritual, it's all connected, so there's really not an either or about it. There's a revelation. It's not an installation. It's already there. So this idea that this life, through self-contemplation, that created another aspect of itself so it could have someone to relate to and experience this whole dynamic, which would not otherwise exist, of relationship, so that its highest rule of harmony could be experienced as unity in form, in time and space, in feeling, in sensing. Would it create a life that would be against itself? Is that even possible? From what we've come to understand, it's not even possible. So how could Spirit, Creator, the Absolute, ordain something that would destroy another aspect of itself? It's really not possible. Another concept that rolls out of this one is this idea of unity. You've seen the bumper stickers, sometimes with the flag background, and sometimes with other sentiments, these preceding or following them, that say, united we stand and divided we fall. Do you think that that means united over here as different from someone else? That's what's going to ensure that we stand? What if it comes from, and it does, this line that says, a house that is divided against itself shall not stand. So if it comes from there, does it still mean a country, a village, a township, a state, a continent, even a planet? Or does it mean something greater than that? How about if we are all one? That when we recognize our oneness, we are united in that, and we are not divided against ourselves. We are not life divided against itself. And so we can stand, and we do stand. Conversely, any idea of division would do exactly that. It would divide. It would cause us to fall. It's a very interesting thing to be present right now and to acknowledge and to honor and to give thanks for people who gave their lives in the name of something that did happen. That's happening now. That we don't all necessarily feel is what needs to be happening. And this is not a political place. No, there is an agreement not to be that here. But can you separate, as others have had to do and will continue to do, the thing, whether it's a war or a disease or a seeming accident? Separate that from the being. And give thanks for that person. Give thanks for the contribution of their life. Give thanks for their showing up. And separate it from how you might feel about the other part of it. And do other work on the other part of it. So far we've talked about forgiveness and the realization that if you examine it casually and quickly, you'll have a different experience of it. Then the spiritual transformational one of recognizing that something great has happened there. And that when we release our idea of division against one another, if we can find a way to dissolve that feeling of them and other that divides us and recognize our unity, we will be able to stand. And we look at this concept again of purpose and say, I can find the best and find the gift and find the good in anything. It doesn't mean that I want to make a career out of it, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that all of those crooked roads were meant to be. What it means is that you can still find perfection in everything because you can't take it out. It's there. It doesn't mean that we have to have difficult experiences in order to grow. We don't have to have trials and tribulations in order to get our lessons. There is a straighter road, and it's one that we can choose. It's available to each of us. So there's also this idea of cycles and being present. There's this concept of cycles, which is something that we get to either participate in or actually be part of shifting. We might be through our choice to remember, through our choice to acknowledge, through our choice to forgive, through our choice to find meaning, through our choice to recognize our oneness with a person or a circumstance or something in our history or something that's going on right now. Let's say we've done all that. An interesting thing that happens is that we have an opportunity, and we're actually participating in this thing, to either start a cycle again that is in alignment with and part of that truth, that purity, that wholeness, by what we choose to think about something and what we choose then automatically to feel and to emote and to say and how we choose to act and what we end up embodying because we said yes to it and expressing and experiencing because it's all part of one thing. We either set something new in motion or we renew something that is in alignment with the divine ideal, the capital T truth, the big L love, the real deal reality, the wholeness. Or we can think we're playing it safe, to do the quick and the casual, and just say, I forgive you. And when we think of gratitude, we just say, oh, thanks. We can do it without the real feeling and acknowledging the real principle and engaging with that. And we'll have a different experience. Because what happens is we are participating in and perpetuating cycles, whether we're doing it consciously or otherwise. We all know there are the thoughts that we acknowledge that we're having. And then there's all of the others. And we think, thank God nobody can read my mind, or at least I hope they can. Because I haven't gotten that all figured out yet. I know I shared a book with Frida. She's not here today. It's called 2150. Very interesting if you haven't read it. It's about this man who in his dream time, he goes to the year 2150. And he was a Vietnam vet. And he lost a leg in the war. But in his dreams, he's got two, and he can run, and he's sexy, and all this stuff. And he has this whole other life. And it's not just that. He has this life in the future when we have cleaned up our stuff enough that we are now telepathic. And so he's like, oh, everybody can read my mind when I go to this dream place, but I do get to have two legs, and I'm hot, and it's very interesting. And then he begins to learn about how what we think and what we feel, if we believe that we're separate from other people, we can get away with having those thoughts and feelings and they won't do any harm. We're mistaken. There are a couple of characters who are real tough dudes and they're really angry. And every time they try to punch somebody, they have an instant experience of being hit back with the same force in the same place. And it really illustrates what's really happening with the response of the law of cause and effect, the creative principle, every day in our lives. So the truth is, even though it might seem easier to get away with really forgiving, really finding meaning, really digging for the gift in that experience, really giving thanks, really transcending that anger or that resentment or that unhealed stuff, until we get to a place where we say, I know you, I love you, you're my brother, you're my sister, we're one. Until we can get there, we will continue to experience the consequences of what we are thinking and what we are feeling and what we are believing. And the thing about that is that another aspect of this connection that's global and then some, this oneness. And scientists talk about a butterfly flapping its wings over in the Amazon or something and causing rain in an opposite side of the planet or a hurricane or whatever. There's a connectedness about us. I know Dr. Rupert Sheldrake did a lot of experiments with people and their pets. And he either was or still is at Oxford. He's, I'm not sure what exactly his title is. But he did these experiments and he realized that if you went away on a trip and you plan to come home on June 10th, and then you just in your mind said, you know what, I'm going to catch an earlier flight. And you booked your flight and went to the airport. Your dog would sit by the door because that is the non-local connection that we have. And it actually applies to more than just schools of fish and dogs and cats and birds. It applies to us. So we really are connected. So what is the relationship then between our unhealed stuff and what's going on out there? I remember, I think it was last week, I said that Dr. Fred Allen Wolf in What the Week Do We Know said there is no out there. So we could not only forgive them for they know not what they do, but we can look in the mirror and say, you know what? We're doing the best we can, and thanks for another great day. Because we're really in this together, and I don't think there was any grand declaration that it would be easy, especially if the agreement is to come in and forget completely everything you knew and who you truly are, and then spend your lifetime remembering it. I'd say that maybe it's meant to be quite a ride. But I have this feeling that when we look with the eyes to see, when we listen with ears to hear, when we feel with a heart to love, we really do discover that we're all one. We really get it. And I really believe that what we're doing here and in places like this, and when we go back home into work, and when we pass through the checkout line, downstairs or anywhere else, when we're in some way even silently recognizing that we're all one, we choose something other than conflict. And we don't have to carry a broom and a dustpan around with us forever. We don't have to be all about the tools for cleanup. We don't have to be all about the tools for healing, nature stuff. We can have less of that. And maybe like on some episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, we'll reminisce about how we used to do that thing we don't do anymore. It does happen. So I'd like to invite you to just close your eyes, and we're going to do a little mantra here that comes from the words of Ernest Holmes. And it was shared at a conference about 5 years ago by Dr. Edward Villian. And it's a wonderful thing to remember. So join me. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. Very often, Ernest Holmes, when he closed the talk, would say, there's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is your life and my life now. Or he would use those words in treatment. So when you're driving around and when you're doing your stuff, there's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. That gets you through anything. And if you can find another word that fits in there,